Think about it, right? So where are their names and whatnot? The fact of the matter is, we barely have the names of even 4,000 to 5,000 Sahaba. And even those 4 to 5, it is a great stretch. And there are many attempts by our scholars to compile the names and biographies of the Sahaba. Many attempts. At least a dozen books have been written in our history to compile the names of all of the Sahaba. Ibn Abdul Barr has Al-Isti'ab fi Ma'rifat al-Ashab, and other books as well, Ust al-Ghaba as well, by Ibn al-Athir. But perhaps the most comprehensive book written to chronicle the names and biographies of the Sahaba is the famous book Al-Isaba fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba by none other than Ibn Hajar, the famous Ibn Hajar. Al-Isaba fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba. And this was, by the way, one of my main sources for the seerah, by the way. Every seerah class I would always look up Al-Isaba, every Sahabi, and I would see any stories from there that I could put into the seerah. So Al-Isaba is the one of the most famous books of the names of the narrators of the names of the Sahaba. And in that book we barely have 4,000 to 5,000 names of the Sahaba. And even these names, sometimes it's not even a name. It's like the one who was sent to this tribe. Maybe it's mentioned in a story, the Prophet ﷺ sent somebody, or this happened, or that happened. So it's not even the full name. Or it's just a kunya, Abu so-and-so, and we don't know anything else about him. So the bulk of this book really just has a name and maybe even one line, not even more than that. Therefore, the number of Sahaba who actually narrated from the Prophet ﷺ a hadith, so we're getting smaller and smaller. Imam Al-Hakim Mustadrak, the author of Mustadrak, he said around 4,000 Sahaba narrated from him. But the famous scholar Imam Al-Dhahabi, the student of Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Al-Dhahabi said, no, this cannot be correct. Perhaps 2,000 or maybe even 1,500 narrated from him. Ibn Kathir, the famous Ibn Kathir that all of us know, he said that the most comprehensive book of hadith is by Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. I mentioned it last 2 classes ago, the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. And despite the fact that Imam Ahmad is the most authoritative scholar of his time, and he has the rank that he does, he has traveled so much, despite all of this, he has narrated from only 978 companions. And if you go look up other books beyond this, you will not find more than 200-300 other names. So the grand total is around 1,200 who narrated from him. And of those this is not Ibn Kathir. Of those 1,200, literally only 4 or 5 narrated the bulk of the traditions. Like only 4 or 5 Sahaba were the ones who excelled in narrating like 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, not 5,000, 3,000, 4,000 hadith. Okay, Aisha and Jabir and Abu Huraira and Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, these were the ones who became like the lions of narrating the ahadith. The bulk of our religion really is preserved by less than maybe 15 Sahaba. Those are the ones who became proficient in narrating the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the bottom line out of all of this, before we move on, is that perhaps 90 to 95% of the Sahaba, they are really not known to us. We don't even know maybe even their names.
Let me get this straight. According to Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, Muhammad had tens of thousands of companions. But out of all these tens of thousands, we can only name about 4,000 to 5,000. Out of those, maybe 1,200 narrated hadith. And out of these 1,200, the vast majority of Islam's tradition come from around dozen people. That's it. Wow. So think about what this means, okay? 9 to 95% of people who actually lived with Muhammad, people who prayed with him, people who fought with him, people who traveled with him, people who got into bedroom, they are basically unknown to history, vanished. And Muslims say Allah perfectly preserved his revelation through this group. Now let's think about the superstar of hadith. Number 1 is Abu Huraira. He spent 3 years with Muhammad, Just 3 years. Muhammad's last 3 years. What was Muhammad doing in his last 3 years? He was suffering from the poison he had. So at that stage, Abu Huraira is around. Yet somehow in that 3 years, he produced more than 5,000 hadith, 5,374 hadith, more than all other companions compiled. Oh, by the way, according to Islamic sources, Umar locked him up for narrating the hadith. Yeah, that's their top guy, okay? Think about it. And then who is next? You've got Ibn Abbas, who was teenage when Muhammad died. He was teenage when Muhammad died. He was again around Muhammad in his last 3 years. He was 10 years old when he came to be companion of Muhammad. Muhammad died when he was 13 years old. He puts 1,660 hadith in Islamic tradition. As a teenage. 3 years, 1,660 hadith. Anas bin Malik, who was teen when he started serving with Muhammad and was with Muhammad for 10 years. So, he was 20 when Muhammad died. He pulls together 2,286 hadith. These are kids. But Muslims want us to believe they memorized thousands of detailed reports, then transmitted them flawlessly decades later. Really? And it gets worse. Think about it. Hadiths were not written down in Muhammad's lifetime. They were not even written down in the lifetime of those companions. They were not written down in the lifetime of Abu Huraira, lifetime of Ibn Abbas. No. They were passed around orally from one mouth to another for generation after generation. By the time you get the first big collection, Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, you are in 800s, almost 2 centuries after the death of Muhammad. So let's put it together. A tiny handful of people, some of them are children, some of them with Muhammad only for 3 years, that's what their contracts, and then 200 years gap before their words are written down. And you want to tell me this is perfect, divinely preserved record of God's final messenger? Imagine if Christians said, oh yeah, teachings of Jesus, they only came mainly from one guy who knew him 3 years, teenagers, and then they passed around orally for 200 years before anyone wrote anything down. Muslims would laugh at us. The world would laugh at us. But that's exactly the situation in the Hadith. And we are supposed to just nod and pretend this is perfectly reliable. Here's the reality. The Hadiths are the foundation of Islamic law, rituals, and theology. And that foundation rests on the tiniest, weakest, and most questionable historical base imaginable. If you want to trust your eternity to the memories of handful of late converts and teenagers, please go ahead and do so. But don't tell me this is divine preservation. The facts don't back it up.